Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Today, we are here with Mr. Jeffrey Burton, an educator, former dean of students, and currently principal, and a leading voice in the fight to end paddling in American classrooms. So, very nice to meet you today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
What I really find interesting is that, you actually used to support and administer corporal punishment among students. However, you now changed your stance on it, and you've actually been a huge advocate in protecting our children in classrooms. So I'm really excited to see the different perspectives that you had. So, in your article titled, I Wanted to Change a School's Perspective on Corporal Punishment, you talked about how you were, promoted to dean of students and you had to administer corporal punishment. So, what was your kind of first initial reaction to this responsibility, and why did you accept it first at the first place?
Well, for starters, just for my background, and I think it's important for the listeners and viewers to understand that I was born and raised from that town. So the school district, a very small population. I was from that area, and then when I later turned around to become to become an educator there, it was just all we knew. That's all we knew as far as disciplining students. So when I had the opportunity to be promoted from dean of students, as well as my health and education and coaching duties, they gave me that role. So I naturally agreed to doing it. So it wasn't a second thought for me. It was just something that, okay, this is my opportunity to step into an administration position very early in my career. I think that was like my first or second year, just in education altogether. So naturally, I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing this. So I was initially open to it. It was something that we were traditionally used to. So it was just traditionally, all right, this is something that I want to do. So I see myself in an admin role later on in my career. So here I am. So I agreed. I initially agreed to it.
Mhm. And you talked about the moment with the kindergarten girl who had, like a tough time at home, and that moment was clearly pivotal to, change your stance on corporal punishment. So, can you walk us through what was going through your head emotionally and ethically, like kind of during that first experience?
Well, yes, and this was several years back, but there were some moments that I remember vividly. So when I walked in, um, my superior, my boss, was the one that ultimately had the say in whether or not the student received corporal punishment, and I was the person that had to give it. Um, so when I walked in, I noticed that the student, she just looked like she had a very rough time, and this was like early in the morning. So the student just wasn't well kept. I could tell that she did not brush her teeth, probably didn't have a shower, probably didn't eat, probably didn't go to breakfast that morning, or probably didn't eat breakfast when she got to school. And I could tell she was very fearful. Um, didn't respond, didn't say much of anything. And I don't think she could comprehend why she was in the office to begin with. So I was really hesitant, and I was just in my brain. I was like, I was just thinking to myself, like, how forceful should I be? Like what would be the aftermath? Like, how would she perceive me as a person walking around the campus, and how would she perceive me afterwards as a person, who's also her health and PE coach? When she comes to my classes, or the a class that she initially loved, prior to. Now, how would that response be afterwards, after this moment in the office? So, a lot of things went on in my mind. So it was very, it was a very, it was a changing moment. That moment was very changing for me, and it was just a lot of thoughts that was going through my head.
And you talk about, your relationship with your students. Like back then, you kind of described yourself as the executioner, right? So how did that affect your relationship with your students and even, as your own identity as a teacher?
So where I'm from and just the region of Arkansas and just Arkansas in general, it was a very low income community. And that's associated with not very much resources. And when you don't have the resources, you don't have the tools to do what you need to do to be able to cope and have the tools to when you're very escalated, have the tools to de-escalate. So when our students were heightened,
Yeah.
they didn't know how to de-escalate. So I always wanted to be the person to build that, establish rapport with them, build a relationship with those students, and then have conversations to be able to have them de-escalate. However, when I came into that role, I used the term in my article executioner because it was no questions asked. I just went and did the job. Just like in, those medieval times, that's what the person who wore the little hat, and that's what they did. They just went in and was an executioner. They didn't speak or did anything. They just,
Mhm.
they just was an executioner. So that's what ultimately was my job during that time. I didn't really have the say in what I did. I just went in, paddled kids, and that was that.
Yeah.
And that's not who I wanted to be as an educator.
Yeah. You mentioned there are, a lot of disparities in how corporal punishment was used against Black students versus white students. What do you believe drives these disparities in rural Arkansas schools?
Well, I I I looked into the data, and we were a very minority, like our school, we only had like 12% Black students, but they made up a large majority of our students that was being referred to the office and also being subjected to corporal punishment. And I think people listening, I think it's important that I highlight that because students of students, our white peers, our white students, and our especially our white girls or our white male students were being referred to the office as well. But once again, you know, their consequence was made differed from those as our Black students, our Black males specifically. So when I went to look into that, went into a data dive, and that a lot of that may have contributed to a cultural disconnect. Maybe there was some bias. I didn't want to. I didn't at the time. I didn't really go into that because I didn't have much information in my younger days as an educator. But now, as I got older, and especially now as an administrator, I really unpacked cultural bias, cultural awareness, and how we respond, especially now being that we are in the South and rural Arkansas. That cultural awareness and that cultural disconnect, and how we respond to our students, our Black and brown students, and students that just has a different cultural background, that plays a lot in how we respond to our students who you may come from a different background, and what we view in the classroom as disrespect or insubordinate, to them when they go home, that may be different. So when they come to school, they associate what they bring home with them as normal, whereas at school it's not normal, or but that hasn't been established
Mhm.
or taught. That hasn't been taught to them. So once again, they go to the office,
Mhm.
and their punishment is what the adult in that moment feel they deserve.
Mhm.
So it goes back to cultural awareness and cultural disconnect, and sometimes bias. And I want to be on the positive and optimistic side, but sometimes you also got to call it like it is, outright racism.
Yeah. I think in actually a previous interview with a researcher, she actually talks about because of like the continuation of systemic racism that in rural areas that we have, corporal punishment like it's actually kind of been more normalized with Black students, right? So that's it kind of causes this like racial bias with teachers when punishing when punishing white students versus Black students. So I think that's great how you pointed that out. In rural areas, corporal punishment, it's also kind of framed as tough love. Like a lot of teachers can talk about, hey, like it's just tough love, right? How do you respond to people who argue that paddling builds character or resilience?
Well, so I try my best not to laugh, because there's other, we have socially emotional curriculum and socially emotional programs that teaches students, and there's whole states that has banned it and outlawed it, and we look at their educational attainment and their scores, if we just really want to take it there, and their success, and they're far better than where Arkansas is. And we look at states like Mississippi and all of those states who still has corporal punishment, and there's no comparison. Like what they're doing is a lot better.
Yeah.
So when we talk about tough love, we just have to really ask ourselves, so what does tough love look like?
Mhm.
What does it look like in a school where we have lack of resources? What does tough love look like in a school where we haven't even mentioned mental health, in an area where 90% of our students are free and reduced lunch, where 90% of our students does not have access to, both parents, where 90% of our students, some of our students don't have, good access to food when they get home, but they come to school and they may not have a pencil.
Mhm.
And the answer is to paddle them. That's just this counterproductive.
Yeah.
So when we talk about tough love, we need to flip those. We need to love tough.
Mhm.
In areas like ours, when they come to school, they come to school for the opposite. They come to school to be loved on, to be supported, and be treated with what they may not get at home.
Mhm.
So it goes back to what I said earlier. I want to be and continue to be that type of now administrator for my students, because they may not get that at home.
Mhm. I love how you talk about, there's obviously other, discipline methods, right? I want to talk about some alternative discipline practices that in your article you talked about the story with, two second grade students who were throwing food in the cafeteria. And instead of paddling them, you made them take responsibility and, like made them clean up the cafeteria. And I thought that was just kind of it shows that like there are other methods that work better than just paddling them. So, based on these events, what other more positive discipline methods did you find to replace paddling?
So I'm a real big supporter of multi-tiered approaches.
Yeah.
And I'm a really big supporter of building empathy in students, putting on the shoes of the people that they've done wrong to. Now the term for that is restorative, but I don't want to just, because it's an actual program. So I don't want to just say it and, because I haven't fully implemented in schools that I've worked in, but I have taken elements of restorative practices in disciplinary actions that I've used. So for example, now that in that article, I used that with second graders, and that was way back when. But just 2 weeks ago, I've done the same thing with with my high schoolers. So there was an issue at lunch, and there was a disagreement that led to two students throwing food on each other. And I made them for 3 days go into the lunchroom and put on the shoes, the metaphorical shoes of the lunchroom ladies, and they cleaned the lunchroom with the lunchroom ladies, it was a perfect storm because the lunchroom staff was understaffed that week.
Mm.
It was two, they only had two workers that week. So it was the perfect storm. And at the end of the 3 days, I brought them back to my office and I told them that, I let them know that, think about what they have to do every single Monday through Friday for two lunches, because we had two lunches, and the time frame in between cleaning up first lunch, lunch A, and lunch B. There's a limited time frame between when they have to clean that up just to get ready for the next lunch. And if they don't get it cleaned up in a timely manner, guess who they have to hear from? You all, because you all start complaining about maybe a table not being cleaned up in a timely manner. So, how does that make you all feel that for 3 days you had to clean up and put on their shoes? And it really had them thinking. And I know teenagers, they like to put on a show, but one of them came back later and was like, and asked, is there a way that I can support, not in the lunchroom, but just other places in the school, and just developing that empathy in our students. What that does, what I would hope, that's my hope. What I would hope is that that builds a community, a positive community of where students start impacting other students. Like, this is not what we need to do. Like, these are the expectations for the campus. We're not gonna leave trash everywhere. We're not gonna throw food everywhere. And hopefully that's my goal, because for one, if we give out a consequence that's not directed towards what actually happened, we're removing them from where the actual consequence happened. So it's not really directly tied to it. But this develop empathy, and that's my ultimate goal. We're developing empathy. The students put on the shoes of lunch ladies and custodians, for that matter, and the parents. That was most important too. The parents was fully supportive, and and we got positive results from it. So and so hopefully that is something. I'm no longer at that district, but hopefully that's something that that district can continue, and something that I will put in place at the new district that I'm at.
I love how you talk about empathy, that you can, instead of kind of like just automatically resulting to physical punishment, you kind of, put these students in other people's shoes and kind of see them from a different perspective, right? To see, like, for the lunch lady's perspective, to cleaning the cafeterias from Monday to Friday every day. And I think that's just a great alternative method other than just, physically disciplining them, because I don't think if you hit students they'll actually learn anything, because I mean it's just kind of like discipline, but they don't really like empathize with, I think it's just a much better way to teach them empathy so that they can actually learn something and, help them on the long run. So if you could speak directly to a parent, a teacher, or like a policymaker that is still defending corporal punishment today, what would you say to them, not just as an educator, but as someone who has lived both sides of this debate?
Well, I would, and I'll kind of clear the air. Like, I've only been when I was in school, I only got paddled once.
Mhm. Yeah.
I was a fairly well, I was sneaky. I was, I was sneaky.
Yeah.
I didn't really get in trouble. But when I did, I mean, that was my punishment. And
Mhm.
even back then, I'm just kind of thinking about what I got in trouble for. I
Mhm.
don't think it shouldn't have resulted in corporal punishment.
Yeah.
But to answer your question, if I'm speaking of legislation, especially in Arkansas
Yeah.
and just nationwide, I would reframe it as a parental involvement type response.
Mhm.
One issue that America is having, district wide, statewide, US wide, is trying to get parents involved. Here's what's happening in our educational system. Especially schools that have corporal punishment. Put this in perspective.
Yeah.
With with our current system, we, rightfully so, we feed your kids, for most part, free, breakfast free, lunch free, which is great. Educate your kids for free, free extracurricular activities, free program, like everything's free. And guess what? At states like ours, if your kid act up, we also get to hit your kid for free.
Yeah.
Parents, you don't have to do anything.
Mhm.
Transportation's free. Drop your kids off.
Mhm.
You just got to pick them up. And even the bus transportation is a privilege, but it's also for everything's on the district. Parents really don't have to do anything. So, and we wonder why there's no parental involvement.
Mhm.
So we wonder why everything is blamed on teachers now.
Mhm.
We wonder why everything's blamed on school districts now, because we've pretty much put everything in this bowl, like this package, and gave to the parents and said, "Hey, we're doing everything for you.
Mhm.
We're giving your kids everything. You don't have to do anything anymore, parents. We're doing everything for you." Even in states like ours, I'm not speaking for all other states, and I'm not even speaking for all other districts in my state, but especially for corporal punishment, schools and districts with corporal punishment in my state, we do everything, and we wonder why we have a parental involvement issue.
Mhm.
This is why we have we don't we're not there's really no reason for parents that has no real reason to be directly involved with their child, other than, let's face it, sports and extracurricular activities. There's really no reason for a parent to say, hey, they see a kid's grade, the grade's good,
Mhm.
behaviors, is good. I really don't have to be involved. My kid is doing excelling in sports. I don't have to be involved. My child acted up, hit them, paddle them. I'll support it.
Mhm.
They don't have to be involved.
Mhm.
So a lot of the accountability, there has to be some type of accountability that does come back to the parents.
Mhm.
Even when we go back, even if we go back to, chronic absenteeism and truancy and putting kids and, well, parents in court for truancy, that has become a lot more lenient now too. So there's definitely a disconnect. There's definitely a dichotomy there. So for lawmakers, legislation, I don't know. That's my spiel. I
Mhm.
just don't know the answer,
Yeah.
because we, as districts, we do everything,
Mhm.
but and teachers work so hard,
Yeah.
districts work so hard, but we also get the blame.
Mhm.
Teachers get the blame,
Mhm.
and we also get the blame for lack of parental involvement,
Yeah.
despite
Mhm.
we do everything. So I
Teachers
don't.
West are also notoriously underpaid
Oh
in
yeah, oh
those.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also a really big. So, like, I guess what you're speaking is, more kind of parent involvement in their child and more kind of responsibility. So, like, don't throw all of the accountability on teachers, but actually take some accountability to yourself.
So responsibility, I'd say in my state has definitely shifted completely, and it definitely shifted
Mhm.
a lot over the past 10 years. Workload has increased for teachers,
Yeah.
definitely,
Mhm.
and responsibility has shifted in terms of how parents have. um I don't want to say parent. I don't want to say that at all. So if people listening and watching, that's not what I'm saying.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is how it's evolved. I'll say that
Yeah. Mhm.
it's evolved, how parents have how parents have taken on responsibility of parenting their child,
Mhm.
and the expectations of when they drop off, or when they bring their kids to school, those expectations has evolved.
Mhm.
So I that's my spiel.
Mhm.
I just don't know the answer to how we combat that.
Mhm. Got it. But thank you so much for sharing your experience. We've, learned a lot about you and you've sent a really powerful message. And to the people watching, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys next time.
All right, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.